Someone on my YouTube page has made a request for a tutorial about brushes and sketching in line weight. So, just gonna do something on that. So this one should be relatively short, hopefully. And I tend to normally, personally, this wants to work. Okay, it doesn't want to move, which is irritating. These are standard brushes apart from that last one in Photoshop, and I think these are as of CS6, I think. So these are like pencils and brushes. So when you right click, you can either get them there, but you can also go to Window, Brush, and then when you open that, it actually opens Brush and Brush presets. I find if you're trying to use new brushes, this gives you a better preview of what the brush does in terms of what it strokes. And this is the part where you can control what the brush does. So if I was select, I've used this one in the past, which is tilt sensitive. So you can kind of it has a nice build up actually for this particular brush. The thing with brushes as well, it's just best to kind of experiment with them really, because depending on what your style is, you'll find one that you like. So but in terms of sketching in Photoshop, I'm personally not a fan of it, purely because it's not as natural or as fluid as other programs. And if I get one of these, and CS5 upwards has been a lot better at dealing with it, but you never seem to get a nice flowing perfect line. And that's on 100% flow and 100% opacity, and just because of the way it deals with the pressure, you get these grains in it, and that's on just that one, I think. So you kind of have to do it a few times. It's a bit. It used to be really jaggedy in Photoshop as well, but if I was to do a new layer, I'd try and just fill that layer with white first. If I use a standard brush, which I use all the time, I usually draw with something around 5 pixels, depending on the resolution on the actual page. It has got better, to be honest. Photoshop has got better, but it just doesn't feel as natural as a program like Sketchbook or Painter. Mainly because Photoshop's never really been designed for sketching in. So I'd say really just play around with the brushes and find one that you like, and don't be afraid to kind of mess around with the settings of the actual brush. So if you pick any particular brush and you click on this little button, it will send you to this panel. And then here on brush tip, you can control the hardness of the brush. You control the spacing. So here you get an idea of the preview. Preview's going to stay small. Let's see if we can increase the size of that preview. No. So you can control the spacing, which is kind of where you get into like creating stitches, and on whatever brush you can control whether it's elliptical and what direction it points in. So I don't know if you can see it on there. You can see it's slanted slightly. If I increase the size, yeah, it's better. So you can change that. And this is on pretty much most brushes. They've all got the same sort of thing. So again, you can play around with the spacing. And that's under brush tip shape. Then you've got things like shape jitter, which if it's got a bit of shape, it kind of starts to rotate it and distort it, so you can get more of a natural looking pencil look to your actual sketch. You can have a minimum diameter per pressure that you put down, and then you'll also get the angle. You can see how that rotates. You know, these are just things, just play around with them really. Roundness, jitter. You can change pen pressure and pen tilt and stuff like that as well. And these are obviously relative to the angle and the roundness. And size can be down to pen tilt maybe. So just testing this out with the pen tilt. It does get thicker when it's vertical, and then when it's sideways it's a bit thinner, but it's not overly obvious. Yes, so that's alright. You can do things like scattering, where you can it scatters that brush away from the original line you draw. You could add a texture to your brush, so you can look up a texture and scale it right and all that kind of stuff. You can have a second brush, I think this is, so you can combine another one. Color dynamics, so half of these I never really use, because I'll literally just do a sketch, and then by the time it comes to finishing the rendering, the sketch isn't there anymore. So I don't tend to play around with all these sort of things. But again, you know, feel free to play around with them and just try them out and see what works for you. But I know that this one, I did quite like this one. And this one as well. Just because it gives it quite an authentic sort of penciled look, especially the way that you can build it up as well. It's good for doing the dark areas and stuff like that, but that's just my personal preference, so it doesn't, you know. But in terms of sketching in Photoshop, depends what you're comfortable with, really. And like I say, I don't tend to sketch all that much in Photoshop. I would usually sketch in Sketchbook or on a piece of paper, and then I'll literally just take it into Photoshop and then render in Photoshop. But say if you are going to do a sketch anyway, let's do a quick one now. So say I'm going to do a BMW or something. And his question as well on one of the videos was how do you make a sketch stand out, which is more important than the process of sketching in Photoshop, because whatever tool you choose to use for your sketching, whether it be a pen and paper or whether it be a digital media, it's down to how you present your sketch and the composition of the sketch. So it's kind of where the art comes into it all. And then you've got to get your perspective right as well. If your perspective is wrong, then the sketch will just look wrong. And then if your sketch looks wrong, your rendering will look wrong, no matter how well you render. So, at the end of the day, if you've got to get all your perspectives right, no matter what's going on with the car or the product or whatever it is you're drawing. So this has kind of turned out to be some kind of coupe. And then it'll boil down to what you're trying to show in your sketch. So if you want to show a certain aspect, what you want to do, you want to kind of add a bit of what's called line weight and make certain areas darker. So I want the foreground in this to be what pops and what stands out. I don't really care about what's going on over here, because whatever happens here is symmetrical to here. So I'll add a bit of line weight around here and make this area stand out. And I'll make the bottom of the windscreen stand out, and the A-pillar maybe. Then I'll probably add a wing mirror. Then I'll add the shadow of the wing mirror. Now I tend to add the shadow of the wing mirror purely to show what the surface is doing on the side of the car. Because just by adding the shadow, it falls on the actual surface, and it just makes it easy to read what your surface is or what your intentions are with the surface. So I kind of want all this here to kind of fade out. It's kind of suggestive, really. And then same over here, and then this will be probably quite tight, maybe. And then what I tend to do as well, I tend to draw a sketch, and then they're never perfect first time, because you're kind of experimenting and fine-tuning and tweaking and all sorts. So maybe, I'm trying to find something that I like or something that works. And by tweaking these, you end up getting I tend to get quite a lot of line work going on. So once I do actually fall on something that I actually quite like, what I'll end up doing then is... Sorry, I'm trying to think about a sketch as I'm trying to explain what I'm doing. So I'll keep going, it's a weird moment. Anyway. So, say if that is what I was happy with, not that it is, but say if it was, I'd tone that down, and then I'll do the same sketch again, but I'll try and be a bit neater with it, because I'll kind of have a better idea as to what's going to be the final lines or final features. So then I'll try and keep it a bit tighter as well. And with this as well, I'll just fine tune again, just more refining and fine tuning and getting something that looks quite nice, make sure perspective's in the right place. And maybe that'll just fade out there. See, you can see like maybe just making decisions really. And then because this is foreground here, I'm going to make my foreground stand out by adding some quite dark and quite thick lines in places. And the way I tend to think about it is, if I've got, let's say I'll explain this with a cross section because it's the easiest way I can think about explaining it. Because I just do it naturally and I don't really think about it. That's because I've been developing my own style over a number of years. But say if I've got in cross section a surface, then maybe it overlaps another surface. So i.e., I don't know, bonnet overlaps a panel or something. I'll make this edge. So for example, that will probably relate here to this line here. I'd make this line darker. So I'd add thickness to this edge here. So when you're looking at it, as that is the end of this area here. All this is a floating panel, for example, in front of this panel here. So the way I treat it is that by adding a thicker line and a bit of line weight, it's kind of casting a shadow on the surface below. So I always put a darker edge on the edge of surfaces and features that are in front of another surface or another feature, i.e. an overlapping panel in this case. So that's kind of a prominent feature. I'll also do it where an air vent is. So if there's a vent of some form, I'll do a darker line. And then I'll kind of start to shade in a bit. But obviously you'll end up rendering stuff. But I won't try to shade the whole thing. I'll just kind of... And then if, say, something ends, i.e. the underside of the car, I'll make that darker as well. Just so it emphasises that is the end of something there. And then, like, i.e. a lighter stroke is more of a crease in a surface, but the darker lines are the end of a surface or the end of a part or a panel split line, part line. So then I'll do this quite dark here. Although I've drawn that about 5 times, which is bad. So I do that quite dark because that implies that, for example, if I do the contour of this, kind of intending this maybe, so that this edge is in front of this surface, hence why it's dark. So if it's something that will cast a shadow, I'll draw a thicker line. And if it's a crease or a feature in the bonnet, maybe I'll leave a lighter line. Again, something that ends, i.e. that is the lowest point of the bodywork between the floor, so that'll be a darker line. And then I'll kind of build it up from there, but because I also want to have a focus region of the sketch, I'll fade out all this side and I'll fade out the back. So this is kind of what's in focus. That's what your eye's drawn to. And then again, I'll follow this with a dark line into the A pillar. I might do one there. And I taper a lot of my lines as well, so it'll be wide here, but it'll just fade out into nothing. So you just kind of know what's going on with the car, really. You can just read what your intentions are. And then I'll always do the far side. And the reason why, no matter where it is in the image, I'll do this because if you look at a car, most modern cars, not all of them, but most, the A-pillar sits prone, as in it sits in front of. Okay, Photoshop isn't catching up. Why is it not catching up? Oh, I've locked the layer. The windscreen will be inset into the actual A-pillars, and I've seen someone sketch it on a rendering quite a while ago, where they kind of show the shadow or the seal or the difference between the A-pillar and the windscreen. And I always find that's quite an effective thing to do. It's just something as simple as that. Kind of, it makes you realise there's a bit of 3D form going on here. You know, there's a change in the surface and there's a change in the surface height. And then it all depends on your design, really. If I've got some kind of highlight, so say if I've got a surface in cross section that's goes down and then it kind of kicks out and then it comes back down. So you'll see this in like the rocker line, as it's called, or the sill of the door. So down here maybe, you'll see some kind of feature on a car, and then you'll see people render the things like, you see it a lot on Eugene Ons, or Ons, however you pronounce his name. I think he's Russian. He's the director of Ford or something, and he did all the Fiesta and the Cougar sketches and the B-Max and stuff like that. So if you look at Ford sketches, most of them are Eugene Ons, and he'll have a lot of highlights where these lines are tapered, whether they be white lines or black lines. So on his, and they're really crisp and really sharp, so they've been pathed out or something. And he'll use that to kind of show how light will fall on a surface. So if I was to do it on, say, this line here, if I were to do a line like that, you kind of do the highlights bending in the corners. And it's, if you look at any real car in reality and you look at how a light, especially at night time, how a street light will fall on the surface of the car, around its features it will bend towards the features in the corners, and you'll see these like almost ribbons of light over the surface of the car. So if you actually study it and you look at it, take a photograph if you need to, but you'll notice it. What's probably best is if I do a Google search. Pinterest. I use Pinterest all the time. And I have quite a few boards actually. So that's me, in case you're wondering. So transport folder. Transport, I'll put all my stuff, anything that inspires me or anything I think looks really nice, I pin it, because I look at it for reference. And so you see these highlights are here. So if I just zoom in on that, so that highlight is kind of showing what the surface is doing and showing how the light will fall onto that car. And he's done it around here, around the sill line, so you see it's kind of wider and then it tapers into a thin line. And they're just really simple things that make the understanding of what the form's doing and what the shape's doing a lot easier. And then again, you can see how all the bottom side is all washed out, but he's got the top side and all the headlights quite tight and nice shading on there. So it shows mainly what the side of the car is doing, but not so much what's going down here, because they really want to show what's going on over here in this particular rendering. And there's a hint of where the end of the car is on the other side, but that's the background and the foreground is here. So it's like this region here is what they want you to focus on. So that's kind of the thing that you're kind of going for, painting all the features then. So I'd start to just render it all in really. I mean, you could do just a little bit of rendering, to be fair. So you literally just do your shadows, nothing else. And the purpose of it is literally just to show the form and what the form's doing. So maybe that's just, I wouldn't even have that. Just delete. So again, just by doing these shaded areas of shadow, basically, that in itself can make a sketch stand out, because it's just making it really easy to understand what's going on in the sketch. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I've actually sketched loads of lines. I mean, it's literally just airbrushed grayscale, just to show, okay, that's going to be a soft surface maybe. It's got a sharp edge. And then just to show maybe there's a change in the surface on the top of this crease on the bonnet. And then I'll probably just, I wouldn't even really go in that far, to be honest. Maybe just erase all that, just shows as a highlight, just shows a bit of form transition, bit of sculpture in it. Yeah, I'll be done with that really. I think it gets to a point where it starts to be where you might as well just carry on and do a full blown rendering. The whole purpose of the idea of sketching is it's a sketch, and you want to do it in as few lines as possible. In places, add some line weight, and then move on to the next sketch. I think if you start spending this kind of time on a sketch, it just turns into a rendering. So it kind of defeats the point of it being a sketch in the first place. So keep them quick, keep the lines nice and clean, add some line weight where things end or it casts a shadow, or where you want to show off a certain surface treatment or feature, and maybe a little bit of shading, but I wouldn't bother any more than that, because the idea of a sketch is all you want to do is get across its key features in a car, especially automotive form. You want to be able to show off a car in 3 lines, as in the rocker line, shoulder line, and the roof line. And then you start to think about things like that. But these are kind of the things that make or break automotive design. And the most successful designs are the cleaner forms and the cleaner lines, and the ones that are less busy. So that's kind of what you're going for, really, in terms of generating ideas and sketches. I wouldn't tend to do any more than that. Like, again, if you just do another 3/4, kind of wants what's happening in the bonnet, whatever the grille is, whatever the headlights are, what happens underneath, and then what is happening with the window, and then what's happening in the sill of the rocker, and then you kind of just want to keep it as clean as possible, really. And it's literally just so you can get across, okay, there's something here, there's something there, and there's something happening over here, and whatever happens in between is it's up for grabs, and then that'll be where you refine it over a series of sketches, and you do tens, if not hundreds, of sketches to develop a design. But yeah, I hope that was helpful. It doesn't feel like it was any help, but I'll let you be the judges of that. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.